Wow, what a week, huh? It's good to be here together, not to take a moment for granted in light of recent events. Appropriately, we're in this series focusing on the Psalms, seeking solace in the midst of this difficult season we're in. How do we handle these emotions that are God-given to us, the emotions themselves? There's nothing wrong with fear. There's nothing wrong with anger and the things that well up inside of us, sadness. But how do we handle those emotions? And where do we look for help in the midst of these anxious days? If you look at the Psalms, and there's a lot of them, they express a wide range of these emotions. You can find some anger in there. You can find some sadness in there. You can find some fear in there. You can also find some joy in there. And these people who wrote these Psalms, just like you and I, struggled with things like feeling alone, feeling isolated, wondering where God is in the midst of life's struggles, feeling defeated, confused, disoriented. And today, then, we're looking at one of the ways that we deal with these emotions and these feelings and these experiences is through what's called lamenting. It's not a word that many of us are familiar with or that we would say that we practice. So first I'm going to begin by saying, what is lament? To lament means to outwardly and visibly express sorrow or mourning or even regret. It can even mean to wail, to cry, and to yell. We honestly don't have a lot of practice in this spiritual act of lamenting. It's more than just grief. It's vocalizing our pain and our sorrow. It's sharing it with others, whether that be friends or family or our church. Historically, lament has been a cornerstone in many cultures, from the Psalms as well as to many others, even into music. There is musical lament. There was a TV series you might be familiar with called Nova. Everybody has seen that. It's a program about the Earth in the atmosphere, and it's amazing camera work and some history and some good education in this show. Well, in one of those episodes, it talked about the remarkable constant global electronic signature that is happening all around us. And in that show, it says it measures about 8 megahertz on a regular basis. But the question that the show answered was, how does this stay at 8 megahertz? And they answered that by saying that there is a steady electrical charge provided by lightning. There are some 8,640,000 lightning flashes worldwide every day. Did you know that? That's a lot of lightning. Most of this we don't see. It's way up there. Okay, way up there. But it's a way that the atmosphere releases that tension that is always building up there. And so lamenting is also a way for us to release these emotions that bottle up inside of us. Now, we do have a lot of practice in expressing our emotions, just not always healthy, right? Sometimes we do it in a toxic way. And so this morning we're going to talk about what does it mean to spiritually lament? What does it mean to be healthy by lamenting? Even Jesus lamented. The book of Hebrews, it says, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears. In other places, it says Jesus was a man acquainted with sorrow. So how do we learn to lament then? We're going to learn today by looking at Psalm 13, David's words recorded in the Scriptures. And it begins with, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me, agony in my mind every day? How long will my enemy dominate me?" We read this, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I've opened up the Psalms and I've been a little bit shocked by the language and almost the aggressiveness in the questioning. I know that some folks, it maybe even makes them uncomfortable because it seems like the author is questioning the very existence of God. Where are you? Why aren't you with me? And so over the years, I know that in talking with people, they've said, I'm not comfortable praying those prayers in the Psalms because I don't feel like that. I don't relate. I feel like I'm questioning God more than I ought to. But I think that's in those scriptures, these words coming down through history to us, reflecting other people's journeys with God. They're honest, authentic, genuine journeys. Modeling to us that, in fact, our Creator is big enough to handle anything we got to say, any feeling that we have. In fact, if these emotions have been given to us, then we're kind of responsible to learn how to use them, process them. Our journey becomes authentic the more we step into them. So laments like Psalm 13 seem to be there to help us. And you might be at a point, I don't know about you, but for me, with all that's been going on recently, I don't even know what to pray anymore. And so sometimes I do turn to these Psalms that give words that I can't express. I'm tired, I'm burnt out, and I need to be able to be genuine. So let's lament together this morning over what has been happening recently. We have a lot to lament about. So I'm going to read a couple of things that I'm going to ask that you participate in this litany by saying, we lament. Let's practice that. We lament. The Colorado school became the site of the 47th shooting that took place at a school in the U.S. so far this year. 24 of which were on college campuses, 23 on the grounds of K through 12. We lament. This tragedy took place less than an hour after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at an event at Utah Valley University. We lament. Thursday marked 24 years since the terrorist attacks on September 11th, which forever changed the world as we know it, especially here in America. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in New York City, Washington, D.C., and outside of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It remains the deadliest attack on American soil. And so, we lament. More than 300 South Korean workers were detained by U.S. immigration authorities in Georgia last week. And just the way it was done, with chains and handcuffs. The raid was a surprise in this little quiet town with this factory that's been there for years. South Korea, a long-standing U.S. ally, economic partner. Can you imagine how they are feeling right now with this raid and the detention of these people? And so together, we lament. I could go on, right? There's more to the news than just those lowlights. I'm not going to call them highlights. A couple of questions for you. What happens inside of you? And it's something to start thinking about over the next couple of weeks. What happens inside of you when you listen to the news, when you read the news, when you watch these YouTube videos? What happens to you in this daily litany when you experience the abuse of power, the suffering of others, the injustices, murder, war? What happens to you? So some people, I did some research, gave these responses. I just get numb because I don't think I could bear the amount of pain I would feel. Well, I get mad at the news companies because they just seem to look for the bad stuff, and there's no balance. Other responses, I find I can't watch violent movies anymore because of the violence happening every day. I glaze over so I can subdue my feelings. I feel upset. I feel helpless and powerless and hopeless. Some of these things get to me and I can't sleep at night. I feel disappointed in people. We should know better. I just don't read the paper anymore. I don't listen to the news. And then finally, someone says, I try to offset the bad news with looking at the bright side. I do this very quickly in an effort to avoid feeling bad. This brings me to a famous painting. Go ahead and put that up here. What's this called? The Scream. Who's the artist? Yes, Edvard Munch, or Munch. Iconic artwork. We've seen this. And maybe this is how you feel right now. You know, I took art history in college one semester. It's a fun little class. But one of the things that we learned in that class was to study the artist and to see what was their inspiration. And behind this, the interpretation that he shared was, this is 1893, it represents human anguish, anxiety, and existential dread. And he says, it was an attempt at sharing how I felt in my childhood, as I had no one to share my anguish with. This also, in my opinion, could be called the lament, right? That's how I feel right now, this week. That's how I was feeling. Very overwhelmed, almost speechless to what is happening right now. Thanks, Sue. We can take that down. Story is told of a little girl who was late coming home for supper. Her mother was irate. Where were you? Dinner is ready. We were scared. Weren't you walking home from school? The little girl replied that she had stopped to help her friend Janie, whose bike was broken, and she had fallen. And so she said, I stopped to help Janie. Parents said, but you don't know anything about fixing bicycles. What were you doing? I know that, the girl said. I just stopped to help her cry. I think that's what lamenting is. Sometimes we need help to cry, to be upset, to release these emotions. We need someone to come alongside of us. So there are over 50 Psalms with lament. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I haven't felt like the scream, I open up to those books or those passages in the Psalms, and I haven't been comfortable. I can identify with these people. Why are they yelling at God like this? And now I do. And the older I've gotten, I've identified with those questions more and more and more. I also didn't realize until I went to seminary how much the Psalms have music right in them and how much are used, right? A mighty fortress is our God comes from Psalm 46. As the deer pants for water comes from Psalm 42. And then you even have contemporary music. Matt Redman, well-known praise song writer. Psalm 103, bless the Lord, O my soul, worship his holy name. Then I will sing of your love forever. And then how about on eagle's wings, Psalm 91? The Psalms were originally the song book for Israel. And the Psalms lead us through these emotions and how we're feeling and how we're reacting and how do we have faith in the midst of this trauma. Humans have this shared desire to share their laments, but sometimes we don't know how, and so we just bottle it up, and then it becomes toxic. But a great example of that, have you ever driven by the rock on the U of M campus that they paint for different things, right? Sometimes people lament in art or even graffiti. You recall the Michigan State shooting on the campus in 2023. They have a rock on their campus. And on that rock, after that shooting, They wrote, "How many more? How many more? How long, O Lord?" They cried out, like Psalm 13. Moving on then, in the passage, the psalmist writes, "Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice, because I am shaken." Lighten my eyes. Have you ever felt that heaviness? Not just from crying, but just that heaviness of, I can't see anymore. I can't see any more of this pain. I can't watch. Lighten my eyes. And then when I go on vacation in the summer and I'm in the woods or by the water, my eyes are lightened. I'm able to release some of the stuff from the year. And then when you read that word enemy, now David had some specific enemies if he is indeed the author of this psalm. But enemies can be many things. It can be the stresses of your everyday life, things at work, things with illness in your body, family members who are struggling, financial woes, temptations, challenges. The Hebrew word translated as "lighten my eyes" means to shine, to dawn upon, or give light. It is a powerful way of saying, in the midst of this darkness, God, lighten my eyes so I can see. You know how your eyes adjust in the dark? You ever do that where you're in the darkness for a little bit, you can see, and then you go into the light or turn the light on, then turn it off, and then suddenly you're like, I can't see anything. That's how it feels right now for me in the midst of this season we're in here, especially in America, but even in the whole world. The war, Israel with Gaza, the war with Russia, Ukraine, this unending tirade of brokenness. Lighten my eyes, God. That's the prayer. That is the genuine way we ask God for help. Simple as that. And then finally, at the end of the prayer, amazingly, the psalmist comes to a place of trust. "But I have trusted in thy steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me." Sometimes you read this and you think, wow, that was quick. But I don't think the psalm was written in like one sitting where a person worked through their emotions in 5 minutes. I think this psalm was written in a reflective time. It might have been written in parts. It might be written after a season of, brokenness and hurt and pain. But the goal, an amazing thing, is a lot of these psalms come back to, "But or yet I will trust you." This is the key. However slender that reed of hope is, this is the key. We struggle to trust God. And then what happens? We struggle to trust each other. Some of you might recall this. President Jimmy Carter and then Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, they met at Camp David in 1978 to discuss peace. President Sadat approved the peace proposal, but it was rejected by the Israeli Prime Minister Begin at the time. There was a stalemate. The three were tired, emotionally drained, about to depart without any peace accord. As President Carter and the Prime Minister were about to leave, they remembered that they had earlier agreed to sign photographs for each other's families. Basically like, paparazzi, will you sign this for me? They met on the front porch of the cabin. President Carter asked for the name of the children as he was signing his photograph. Prime Minister Begin reciprocated. Then President Carter decided to show the photographs of his grandchildren describing the personality of each child. Prime Minister Begin also did likewise. As they looked at the pictures, tears filled both of their eyes as they said, "What type of world will our grandchildren grow up in?" Prime Minister Begin returned to his cabin and reemerged and said, let me see that peace proposal once again. This is the end goal of our laments. If we can just lament together and not become divisive and point fingers and say it's them, they're the wrong ones, we're the right ones. If we can come together for the sake of even children, we might learn to trust again. You recall Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, can this cup be taken from me? Do I really have to go through this? Tears, painful prayers, looking to his coming death. Do I really have to go through this? Lamenting. If it's possible, is there another way besides this one? The end of that beautiful, honest, genuine prayer, trust, but not my will, your will be done. The journey of lament is not an easy one. It takes courage to walk through it, but if we don't do it, we end up more broken, holding on to hurt, blaming. One of my favorite songs comes from the rock band U2, and they wrote music to Psalm 40. The song is simply called 40. And in that song, the lament is how long to sing this song. And of course, they were talking about the wars in Ireland between the Protestants and the Catholics, and the bombing, and the families and the children who were dying in the midst of these disagreements. How long to sing this song? Anglican Archbishop and theologian Rowan Williams argues in his book, Tokens of Trust, that Jesus came to answer the question to show us that God is with us, that God is trustworthy, that God walks through this pain with us, that God gives us the power to make these decisions, to work in this world together, to be the answer to prayers, to bring reconciliation and to bring healing. Martin Luther King says this about loving your enemies. He was in jail at the time. He had been accused of being a communist. His house had been bombed. He was jailed over 20 times. Yet in his sermon he says, hate multiplies hate in a descending spiral of violence, just as injurious to the person who hates as to his victim. But love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend, for it has creative and redemptive power. Robert Kennedy Jr. says, what we need in the U.S. is not division. What we need in the U.S. is not hatred. What we need in the U.S. is not violence or lawlessness, but love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country. These values, spoken from two who would be assassinated, speak truth, speak love, speak peace, lamenting a very difficult time in our country. And I feel like we're in that place again, aren't we? It's going to take each of us one by one to lament, to own these feelings, and to move forward as citizens of heaven here on the ground. To be that light, to ask for that light. Lighten our eyes, O Lord, that we would not be overcome by the enemies surrounding us. The enemy is not flesh and blood. Flesh and blood needs love like you and I need love. Our brothers and sisters around the world need love. Purpose does not come through power, dominance. but through love. May we be those people, but first, we'll get there by lamenting.